Dr. Alice Horton from the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton in the UK. Alice is an anthropogenic contaminant scientist with expertise in the fate and ecological effects of microplastics in aquatic environments. Her research focuses on how the connections between land, rivers, lakes and oceans lead to the transport and accumulation of microplastics within the environment, their associations with organic chemicals, and how these processes influence the interactions and effects of microplastics on aquatic organisms. Alice has an extensive publication list, including studies regarding the identification of microplastics in UK rivers and freshwater fish and their effects. I had a chat with Alice last week to find out more about her current research.
Now, one of the key projects that I'm currently working on is called LabPlas, and this is an acronym for Land-Based Solutions for Plastics in the Sea. And this is looking especially at the sources, distribution and pathways of microplastics from land through major European rivers into the North Sea, as well as trying to assess the seasonal distribution of these plastics and whether it varies depending on when in the year you look for them. We're also trying to understand the ecological interactions, so how biota are interacting with microplastics and ingesting them, and also the ecotoxicological effects of these particles on those organisms. And the emphasis of this project is especially to look at particles smaller than 100 microns in size, so really at the smaller scale of the end of microplastics, because we know that these small particles tend to be the most hazardous when it comes to the ecotoxicological effects on organisms and ecosystems.
I asked Alice where the uncertainties lie in research around microplastics.
With respect to the unknowns about microplastics, the long-term ecological effects are something that we really don't understand very well at the moment. We know that ecosystems will be exposed to microplastics for long periods of time because plastics in the environment don't tend to degrade very quickly. They have a very long residence time and they move around and they change their characteristics. But ecosystems and organisms will be exposed to them. We know that there can be toxicological effects of this exposure, but not what this means for future projections of the health of these ecosystems. We also have questions about human health effects. We don't really know what the effects of small plastic particles, microplastics and nanoplastics even, are to humans. We know that we ingest them, that we breathe them in, they've been found within human tissues, but not what the effects of these are. And that's not to say that we should all go out and panic about the fact that plastics are going to cause huge harm to humans, but we do need to try and understand what those effects might be. We also want to try and understand the timescales of persistence and residence. I mentioned that plastics are present for long periods of time within the environment, and we hear these statistics about one plastic bottle, for example, will last for 450 years. Now, this is a huge estimate, and this really depends enormously on where this item ends up within the environment. If it's in the deep sea, it will degrade far slower in these very cold, dark conditions than it will on a beach where it's exposed to sunlight and breaking waves. The final thing I wanted to highlight is research into novel materials. So if we're trying to change or reduce the way in which plastics are used, we might need to replace some of these with different materials. And we need to understand that these might be beneficial, but they might also have their own issues when it comes to their breaking down and their residence within the environment. So this is something we really need to research before we start using these materials more widely.
So microplastics don't respect country borders and move across different environmental mediums, requiring a range of disciplines and stakeholders to work together to address the problem. I asked Alice what role collaboration was playing in microplastics research and management.
There are also lots of instances of nations learning from other nations. For example, when it comes to the microbead ban, the first country to enact this was the Netherlands in 2014. And since then, we've had bans across the globe, from the USA all the way through to the UK in 2018. In terms of research collaboration, this is the way in which we do all of our research. So we very infrequently do research within one organisation. We tend to work across boundaries, across institutes, and across the globe to develop solutions, to develop innovative ideas, to carry out the best research that can produce evidence that can help other people, for example, governments develop policies, can contribute to industrial decision making on the way in which plastics are manufactured, and so on. So research cannot be done alone and is a huge collaborative effort.
Some great insight from Alice on microplastics, providing a great example of how the actions of society, in this case the use of plastics, can have wide-reaching environmental impacts which we are only now beginning to understand.